How's it going, folks? Dane Abruzzo here. Today we're going to talk about a nice, short, but interesting topic. I'm going to call it dressing for rescue today. We'll see shortly that that includes both wearing gear, what gear we should have, and a few tips on survival as well. So a big thing about any kind of rescue work and really being a prepared person in the backcountry ready to either deal with emergencies as other people encounter them or deal with your own wilderness emergency is really being prepared for the environment, right? A surprisingly large number of the people that we encounter in the rescue world are simply underprepared. They don't necessarily have catastrophic falls, they don't necessarily come down with a heart attack 3 miles out in the backcountry. A lot of the time, they simply didn't quite prepare for the day that they ended up encountering. And it doesn't mean that they didn't have some sort of education, they didn't have some sort of skill set when they walked out there, but most of the time we find that in general, people just are preparing for what they expect, not for the unexpected. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we can make better decisions before we get outside in terms of being able to anticipate some changes that might change the way our day goes. So first off, I want you guys to look at a couple of pictures here. So we have three individuals who are traveling through the wilderness, and they kind of have their own unique styles, techniques, and some of them are dependent on the situations at hand. So at first, let's look at this guy on the far left. We see that this gentleman's out here for a nice day of probably some backpacking. Maybe it's a single day trip, maybe it's an overnight, but we can see that he's got a big, large knife on him. He's kind of got a tent bag hanging. His chair's a little bit wonky. He even has a little tambourine drum. It looks like maybe that's an old school canteen. But really, you know what I would call this guy? I'd call this guy a junk show. And, you know, it's not to be demeaning. I've never met the guy. I found this guy randomly on the internet in a Google search. But realistically, as professionals, anyone wanting to kind of be that professional in the outdoors, whether you're a leader or just a really interested recreator who's taken the time to take this course, really we want to be a little bit more put together than that, right? Because as soon as now the weather starts changing, the day becomes a little bit more extended, maybe the brush, he loses the trail, and all of a sudden these things start to impede on his ability to move forward with his day. So let's move towards what we would maybe want to look like. In this upper right-hand corner, we see a guy traveling on a glacier. He's actually by himself, so this isn't really a technical course, but in general, we like to be prepared for the environment that we're going into. And this fella, unfortunately, isn't roped up to be traveling where he's traveling. Now, maybe he's a professional, maybe he's been in this area before, he's very comfortable with the area, but in general, it's good to know what you're getting into, what the level of difficulty is. So understanding what your hike risks are, what kind of wilderness area you're going into, identifying the objective hazards and risks that are associated in the area is really important. Are we dealing with bears? Are we dealing with crevasses? Are we dealing with avalanches? These are all very, very different risks, but we have to be able to categorize them, understand them, and really be ready to deal with them if that's what we're going to encounter. And so finally, we'll kind of move down to the right-hand corner. This fella goes by the name of Conrad Anker. He's a very accomplished mountaineer, and we can see that he's traveling nice and compact. He's got a decent sized pack, but you can tell he's probably making what we call a summit push, going all the way to the top. So he has his kind of bare essentials, but we see some really important gear here. We see this fellow wearing some sunglasses for eye protection. I'm pretty sure this here, right here, sticking out of the corner of his hood is a headlamp. He's also carrying some ski poles for walking. We can see an ice axe on his hip. He's got another ice axe back on his backpack. He's clearly prepared for the environment that he's traveling in, and we can see that his pack is nicely packed. There's not a lot of things hanging off of it. It looks very well insulated from the elements. If there's blowing snow in the area, not all of his things aren't going to get wet. And so all of those factors are going to contribute to his survival if things get out of hand. Now, if in this environment everything goes just as plan? Well, maybe he brought a couple extra gears, and he brought a little bit more than he needed, but in reality, we want to be a little bit over-prepared in these environments. So really, we want to start looking at equipment and the clothing that we wear and the things that we choose to bring out with us into the wilderness as really a style of risk management. We can see here that there's actually a couple articles on this topic, and this one we're going to cite really kind of gives us an insight into what the average Joe out there that's going out for a hike goes out there with, and how prepared / underprepared they are. And we can take some general observations from that. So in general, we see, again, as I mentioned before, most people plan for the ideal. They don't plan for the abnormal. They don't plan for even the real sometimes. So maybe they look out at the weather, they make an intelligent decision that we think thunderstorms are moving in the afternoon, so we're going to try to get up early, walk out the door at 7 a.m., be on the trail by 8, and that'll put us back at the car around 12:30. Well, that's their kind of ideal plan. The real plan is, well, maybe we get a little bit lost. We get off track, we're out there for a couple extra hours, and all of a sudden now the world completely changes. We're in the midst of a rainstorm, and we weren't prepared for that realistic expectation because we were so clouded with our ideal. Here's a specific quote that kind of highlights this again. In addition to hikers, responders place themselves at great risk during a search and can become additional victims. So it's not just the people that we see out there getting rescued. It can also be rescuers in as well. And there's kind of a whole another bag of tricks and a bag of equipment that we want to bring as rescuers into the environment. But this quote right from this published journal is mentioning that even the rescuers, the ones that are highly trained, many times plan for the ideal rescue. Maybe that's a little bit different than the ideal trip out on a nice 5-mile hike, but in fact it can still be very different from the rescue that you see. So in general, again, we want to talk about prevention as well as techniques for rescue. So how can we better educate the public, and how can we, as a rescuer, whether designated or not, just casually walking into an event where we become the rescuer, how can we better be prepared for that exact environment? So from this article, they give us a few rescue essentials, and there's the 10 essentials that are commonly talked about. I'm sure this is a pretty comprehensive list of the 10 essentials, and sometimes it gets hard to really compartmentalize these ideas and make sure that we all have them. So it's important to plan ahead. Again, have some kits at home that are ready to go, a survival kit, a first aid kit, a general idea of what sort of clothing you're going to wear based on what time of year it is, and that way we don't end up forgetting those kinds of essentials. But we'll kind of go through this list very quickly here. So we have compass, we have whistle, fire capability, first aid kit, light, knife, rain protection, map, extra clothing, extra food, water. So nothing really surprising here. We'll touch more specifically on a few of these notes here in a bit. The one thing that I would really highly add to this list of 10 essentials is communication. So we really need a communication device to the outside world. This is for our own benefit, or it's for the benefit of the people around us, and it's for the benefit of random bystanders that we might encounter in the outside world. We want to make sure that we have a way of getting help rather than having to abandon these people. In the event that we do have to abandon them, we'd much rather be able to hike up to the nearest ridge line to gain a cell signal in the modern day of technology and utilize that resource, rather than backtracking all the way to the car, finding out how to get into town, get in touch with somebody who can call the right people. You kind of get the picture that a piece of communication is a really, really essential tool. It's not that we want to rely on other people to rescue us when we get out there, but when everything really goes bad, it's something we really need to have. And now we're going to kind of go into that rescuer topic. Hypothermia treatment would kind of fall back into our category of extra clothing, as well as rain protection, as well as fire capability, but we want to add a few things. We want to bring some sort of insulating mat with us. That can be a nice compressible, inflating mattress. We also want a nice light sleeping bag or an assortment of down clothing, and we'll get to the specifics of some down topics here in a bit. But really, our hypothermia kit's not just going to be extra clothes. It needs to include some sort of insulation. It needs to include really that nice mummified wrap or a lot of clothing to basically imitate one. And it definitely also will involve what's farther down on our list, which is a shelter. So we'll review the mechanism of heat loss here in a second, but those are really our important things for hypothermia. Right now we're going to change gears a moment, and we're going to look at this fella named Kilian Jornet. Some of you may have heard about him, some of you, he might be new to you, but he's a phenomenal athlete. He's kind of pushing some boundaries when it comes to fast and light mountaineering / mountain running. He's an ultra marathoner. He's won almost every ultra marathon mountain race in Europe and across the world, and he, as we can see from this picture, has kind of an interesting approach to the mountains. Here we see a fella on a route tied into a harness, wearing a helmet. You can tell he's wearing a jacket. He's, I think, got an ice axe dangling next to him, and right next to him is Kilian Jornet running down this mountain in a pair of shorts, a pair of tennis shoes, and a tank top. Obviously, these two people prepared for the same environment in very different ways. He's kind of the ultimate idea of the light and fast mentality, and we're going to watch a short 6-minute video here that's just fascinating in terms of observing exceptional athletes in the world of the mountains, and we'll move on from that to discuss a recent event which could be worthy of an ethical discussion.